All right, we're good to go.
Okay, so being Wednesday, May 1st, 2024 at 6:30 p.m., have a quorum. I'll go to item 1 and call the Bridgewater Planning Board to order. We don't have any public hearings this evening. This is a planning board workshop on a proposed zoning ordinance amendment. This is just a discussion on an ordinance potentially being introduced for an adult active senior living facility pursuant to the Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. Mass General Law, Section 38, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting is being conducted with remote participation to the greatest extent possible. First, attendance of the members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time. This meeting is being recorded within 48 hours. Recorded on the city's website. I'm reading off an old one. I pulled up the wrong version, but this was extended until 2025, I believe. So now the following Bridgewater Planning Board members are participating remotely. I'm Patrick Driscoll, the chair. Mr. Michael McDonald, the vice chair. Mr. Stephen Geller, Ms. Astrid Rojas, Mr. Edward Ted Haley, and an alternate member is Ms. MJ Spadone. Following Bridgewater Town staff are participating with us remotely this evening as well. Mr. Robert Rulli, our Community Economic Development Director, Mr. Shane O'Brien, Town Planner. Is there any other town staff on Shane?
I believe Steve Solari was here, is here, and that's it.
Okay, Mr. Stephen Solari, the Building Commissioner. So this, I welcome on for the public hearing reading because again, this is a pretty informal workshop. Mr. O'Brien is going to at some point introduce an act of a senior village amendment to the council, and he wanted to introduce it to us tonight and get some initial feedback. So if everybody's okay with that, I'll go to item 2, and I'll turn it over to Mr. O'Brien for his presentation.
Hi, thank you. Once again, Shane O'Brien, Town Planner. I'm going to do a quick little presentation. This presentation will be available online as well. I did send it over to the planning board already, as well as we have the language of the current ordinance the draft ordinance of what I've prepared so far. But I have a quick little presentation that'll be available online as well about what we're looking at. So what we're looking to do and propose, because this has been something that we've been kind of thinking about, is looking at a 55 plus more active adult village style draft ordinance. So in the past, there's been some recent proposals, which includes the approvals of a mobile home elderly community, which was approved way back in the day, where you got Stone Meadow and Long Pond back in 2000. As recent as the recodification of the zoning bylaws to ordinances, which include the inclusion of senior housing facilities, as well as a ordinance that didn't get very far, which was withdrawn before public hearing, of adult retirement communities in the planned development district. So what can I say right now is that we do have a senior housing ordinance in which we define senior housing as housing over the age of 55, subject to senior housing laws, as well as the Fair Housing Act, which allows for communities to place age-restricted housing in compliance with certain requirements and rules. Currently, we define senior housing facilities in our ordinance from the 2022 recodification as anything that's an assisted living, continuing care, independent living, or long-term care facility. And even with that independent living facility, it's a facility providing apartments for rent that includes communal dining and other services within the frame of one larger building. As well as we have our current manufactured housing elderly community, which is Stone Meadow and Long Pond, where they are a 55 plus community, all held under single ownership, and that community is for the placement of manufactured homes And as we know, they accommodates way more than 3 manufactured homes in there, over in High Pond and Stone Meadow. So what we want to kind of produce, or what I've been kind of looking to produce based on the things that I've highlighted, is that the current 55 plus market in Bridgewater doesn't consider home ownership. It considers rental. It's either you're renting to an individual entity or you're renting to some sort of assisted living facility where there's a sole proprietor there. So what I'm looking to do, because you have a lot of these in other communities, and I'm going to pull up some examples, is that you have 55 plus ownership within a townhouse style, duplex style, owner occupied style in these larger community areas. So one example from a former occupation of mine, I worked in the town of Framingham where there was a project called Millwood Preserve. It's on a former golf course. It's a bit on the larger side. We don't have a lot of 65-acre properties within town that's still developable. But kind of the inspiration, what I got from this is kind of the design style where you're looking at duplex, triplexes, garage oriented style, 0-step entrances, master bedrooms on the first floor, where you're incorporating a design geared towards the 55 plus, and not just in the aspect of looking at a mobile home community as well as a larger facility, but also incorporating activities within these areas, these village. I guess the example I'm using is like an adult active village, where you have walking trails, you have amenity space, you have a clubhouse, you have sidewalks at least on one side of the road, and having the ability for someone to downsize but not necessarily have to rent to a different person. So another example that's more of a shorter scale, or a smaller scale for that matter, is East Street Commons in Hadley, and I'm sure there's plenty of examples we'll probably hear about today. We've heard there's different places in Norton, Easton, et cetera, but it's kind of looking at this style of design and zoning for sites that are more kind of more similar to what we have in Bridgewater. So this is one that's formerly a single family house with farmland in the back, a 10-acre site, which is adjacent to a walking trail in Hadley. So kind of my goals for this ordinance is to provide 55 plus housing that's a difference from senior facilities and mobile housing elderly communities. Those will still be on the books, but it's more creating that variety of style of housing, which is duplex, triplexes, townhouses, requiring open space similar to what we have in our open space and conservation uh, district development area. Walkable neighborhoods, universal design concepts, like I mentioned before, first floor master bedrooms requirements, 0-step entries. What I'm also looking to do is if you go back to High Pond in Stone Meadow, if you've ever driven down there, it's one way in, one way out. What I'm hoping for is at least 2 forms of egress, looking at sites that are 7+ acres, and kind of establish it similar to our open space and conservation development, as well as still leave that option out there, because I think there's certain projects that would be better suited for 55 plus. And there are certain projects that would be better suited for an open space and conservation development. And this would not be its own district. It would just be similar to the open space, where it just be allowable within our current residential zone. So that's R, A, B, C, and D. So the goal is just to kind of establish another subset of diverse and different types of housing for 55 plus, utilizing environmental features or establishing amenity space while creating more planned development that allows for 55 plus ownership for those who live in town and want to maybe downsize, or sell their house, 2.5-story house, and then live somewhere where their master bedroom or bedrooms aren't on the first floor. So consideration is some definitions that would be utilized. Some of these would be in the general definitions. That would include townhouses, defining what we would call a townhouse. An exclusive use area. You typically see exclusive use areas in properties like condos where people would have certain areas where they could do whatever they wanted. So in the case of this, you would have exclusive use areas where if someone wanted to have a shed or a garden, or they wanted to plant trees, there would be an exclusive use area. Whereas in most of these projects, they're all just condos, and then there's a HOA or condo association that manages the rest. So other definitions would just include different things, just kind of tying into senior housing and senior housing laws. So in terms of land requirements, what I'm looking at, and this is just kind of the tip of the conversation, in terms of lot sizes, RAB being it's more rural in Bridgewater, we would look for at least 15 acres for a minimum lot size. RC 10 acres, and in the residential D area, it'd be 7 acres for the minimum. I'd look for all these properties to be located within residential zoning district. There are no use variances in town. We do not allow for them. And as well as what I would look for from a infrastructure standpoint is that these projects be connected to town water and town sewer. So additionally, and this could be a point of discussion as well too, in terms of some dimensional requirements. For an RAB area, you're looking at a open space or a preservation area of at least 35%, 25% for RC, and RD is a 20% due to the having it a smaller acreage. Here's some examples of some setbacks. So for some developments, whether it be a single family, a duplex, or a triplex, that the expectation for frontage, that's a good point in terms of missing a side of that table. So that table 2, that would be primarily for frontages. I don't know where the front setbacks and side setbacks are for those, but the frontages for an RAB would be 180 and 60 feet based on the zoning district. I would say that the front setbacks would probably be similar to what's included in table 3, which includes the size of an individual lot, setback from roadway, separation from other buildings. So those setbacks would be covering 30 to 20, 25 to 20 feet from a front, side, and a side and a rear standpoint, as well as building height would still be allowable per the underlying district, which is 35 feet. But the expectation is that there be some sort of master bedroom and master bathroom on the first floor. So in terms of process, what I'd be looking to do is that every application that would come before, it would come before obviously this planning board for a special permit, but the basis of how many units would be allowed for a project would be based on a preliminary subdivision style plan. It would be looking at how the plan is prepared in accordance to our current preliminary subdivision plan requirements, as well as requiring boundaries, identifying the open space and amenity space, as well as other remaining land in the area. And then the planning board has rights to place other standards to reduce the amount of units based on quality of the land, capacity of public water and sewer infrastructure, as well as the capacity of adjacent roadways and sightline distance. So in terms of applicability, we're looking for it be a kind of a combination of a special permit and this preliminary design plan. Come before the planning board, where the planning board could either approve, deny, or approve with conditions based on the special permit standards for these projects. Allowance for waivers of these processes, so not necessarily variances, but at least a majority of the vote of the board that would require some sort of waiver from any stipulations. You would have to have some sort of amenity space or amenity structures. And I'm going to skim this over because it's a lot of verbiage, and this will be available online, and we can discuss this as well. But my goal is to create at least amenity space on site. We do have a lot of developments where people come in and propose, and it's just 15 units or, this style of open space developments where there's really not an amenity space. The amenity space is the 40% of the property that's wetlands that's unusable that someone's looking to donate. And that's not really usable for those who are there. It's looking at actual available usable space, whether it be through courts or trails or community gardens, usable space, and as well as looking at density bonuses within these spaces to allow for promotion of that, because we have to have some sort of requirement, but people usually typically look for that minimum requirement as part of it. um, Looking for making sure that these preservations are utilized in a proper way and there's no structures in it, and that there's a percentage of open space as well. In terms of designing structures, making sure that they comply with building code and that firewalls and rear walls shall conform to typical requirements, that deeds make reference to the recorded ownership of the HOA, and making sure that the exclusive use areas as well are referenced in the homeowner's trust. I'm going to make reference to it as well, where making sure that there's some sort of affidavit that someone is who's living at these properties, it's a 55 plus individual, and that would go with the sale of the property, and that would kind of continue to exist as the development continues, which is typical of 55 plus communities, and as well as amenity spaces for whether it be neighborhood meetings, HOA meetings, as well as a space for personal services. So some of these locations could have you know uh, some sort of occupational therapist come on site, or whether it be some sort of, I wouldn't say insurance agent because you would not want them, but someone that can solicit services for those in the neighborhood. It could be a yoga professional or a physical, some sort of physician to come into the space, and that any clubhouse or amenity space would have to accommodate that individual. So in terms of unit makeup as well, just make sure that it mixes a bunch of architectural styles. You know, Cape Cod Colonial Ranch, typical duplexes and triplexes that you're seeing in different places. Just as long as it's blended, a variety of exterior materials is not going to be necessarily a requirement of type of material and colors, but it's just different colors of different color palettes, different styles of roofs, and then making sure that no roofs are flat and that mechanical equipment is screened. So typical things that we would require through a site plan review process. So the big highlight is part of this zoning is also requiring, as part of these projects, some knowledge of the architectural style that's going to be placed here. So making sure that doorways are a minimum of 36 inches wide on the first floor, minimum of an indoor garage space, you know, making that sure that these first floor bathrooms have grab bars and other features. And then the big one is the master bedroom with an accessible bathroom on the same floor as the kitchen, living room, and dining room. So that would be the first floor of a lot of these properties. Making sure that there's walkways and making sure that these properties have at least sidewalk on one side to connect to other networks, whether it be an adjacent sidewalk, an adjacent walking trail, an adjacent bike trail, et cetera, et cetera. As well as look at opportunities for fence structures, um, decks to be included as part of the design, because they're very desirable, as well as the potential of those decks to be even 3 season or 4 season rooms in lieu of one of those. So other typical design standards would require 2 vehicular parking spaces per unit, making sure that there's visitor parking as well, because that's a common thread between a lot of these. The garages don't dominate the frontage of these structures. They kind of just matches the architectural design of this. So a lot of this is a lot of architecturally based concepts. Um, when there's a perimeter buffer, that most of these areas stay preserved to the natural character of the neighborhood. I know that that's been a discussion for a lot of planning board projects. That's clearly discussed here, that there's preservation of existing trees and landscaping in there, making sure that there's street trees designed in front of these structures that would match our current street tree requirements, as well as different types and styles of landscaping within these. So infrastructure improvements, typical things, filling out a water impact form, having discussion with DPW, as well as incorporating sustainable energy sources into these projects' infrastructure. Those could be utilized even through a possible density bonus, because we do utilize solar panels on roofs to allow for some density bonuses in town. So there's consideration of that too, as well as just general infrastructure issues in terms of stormwater and making sure that everything matches what our current standards are. As well as roadway infrastructure things, making sure that we look at constructing this to meeting the development standards of our subdivision rules and regulations. What I would look for is that these projects at least minimally meet the standard for 11 houses, 11 units or more, which would require for sidewalk on one side, and that's separated from the roadway. Looking to see if some of these properties could incorporate one-way streets just for a safety perspective, because that could allow for parking on the other side of the road, as well as just typical complete street standards that we would ask for in a community. So if the opportunity presents itself and someone could provide, sidewalk and separated bike lanes and other improvements, we definitely would welcome them as part of the design. So there's consideration for a density bonus if someone provides, over the open space that we currently allow, that would allow for some bonus units as well as if the planning board determines that there's some significant amenities brought to the town, there may be a bonus of at least 10%. And those are based on the density bonus of properties that would be 2-bedroom units, as well as requiring for buffer areas around town. That's typical from what we have, at least of 20 feet. The board can waive buffer requirements on portions of the lot if it just doesn't make sense for the design of certain properties, as well as stormwater management be consistent with our current stormwater standards. These would have to establish a homeowners association. That homeowners association language would have to come before town staff, could come before planning board, as well as town council for review, just to make sure that these documents provide that these properties are maintained in perpetuity. The expectation is that the town's not going to be accepting these properties. These are going to remain either private roadways or driveways within these developments, and that snow and rubbish removal be the responsibility of the property owner, with no responsibility of the town. Also, in terms of review, is making sure that there's information regarding the age restriction that's going to run with it'll be filed in the registry of deeds, whether it be with the same time as a declaration of homestead would be filed. But that would allow for occupants, that would require occupancy of at least one adult who is 55 years or older. Marketing of the unit shall be, comply with fair housing, but it's, the strategy is to market to Bridgewater residents, as well as allow for a transitional period. If the death of an owner of a property or foreclosure, that exemption shall be allowed for the transfer of the unit for up to 3 years. But we could also reduce that to 1 or 2 years, depending on, the comments that we have. So a couple things that I'm still trying to iron out in my own head, because, you don't really see a project until it's designed, and you don't really see the problems of a project until they're designed. So I think I just have to kind of wrap my head around, maybe this is something that the board can assist with, not just today, but kind of in future discussions or sending comments over. But to kind of determine these tables for proper percentages as well as dimensional requirements. I think the utilization of the open space and preservation areas works for properties that look for the open space and conservation development. But some of these properties as well, you're looking at it from a perspective where there may not necessarily be open space that's going to be preserved, or or preservation areas or wooded areas that necessarily are going to be preserved as part of this. So how we calculate that, because it's looking more so for amenity space and trail space rather than, looking for just preserving, certain types of open space. As well as just the focus on inclusion of amenity space or utilizing amenity space for these developments towards open space. As well as kind of create a variety of, like I said, not only is this concept mixing the types of housing for 55 plus, but it's the types of housing within the town, because there are projects that are better suited for subdivisions, or 4 lot subdivisions or open space plans, or there are some projects that are better just better suited for retreat lots as well. So I'm looking for assistance on that, just from a board perspective, and kind of in general perspective, on how we can kind of better utilize these things, because I think the whole concept of this ordinance is to look for a better aging in place sort of style of design in town that we feel is desperately needed. um I think that this provides a good variety of style of housing. But I'd like to hear your feedback in terms of some of your comments or concerns, and then we'll kind of go from there.
All right. Shane, I'm gonna shut up. Can you guys hear me all right now? Because I know I've been in and out earlier.
You're
Can you hear
kind of
me?
in and out, but yeah.
Can I just add a couple of things before you open it up?
Sure.
First of all, I want to commend Shane, because there's a lot of work that went into this to get this conversation started. But going back to the first community meeting that we did with Vision Reality last June, one constant theme we've been hearing at every meeting we've ever done was the need for 55 and older housing, not assisted living, not a convalescent home, not manufactured housing, that people that were aging in place, as Shane mentioned, that might have a 2-story home that would like to stay in Bridgewater and have a 1-story home. We don't have anything like that. There's benefits to the larger community because it opens up family housing for people that are downsizing and wanting to be close to town. So again, I can't stress enough, every public meeting and the workshop that we did, we heard people asking us, are you going to have any kind of 55 and older active housing? So I think, as Shane mentioned, this is something that's very important. I think the community is going to benefit from it in a number of different ways. We're not suggesting that what Shane shared tonight is the end all, but we do want to have this conversation move forward. We do have developers that are interested in doing projects already, 55 and older. So we'd like to keep this process moving. Thank you, Mr. Driscoll.
All right, can you hear me? I switched it up a little bit. Can you hear me better now or no?
Yeah,
Yes or no?
it's a reluctant yes.
All right, so, and I'm glad we're starting the process on this, and I like it, and I just hope that it doesn't change the character of the neighborhoods at all. So before we go forward, town water and sewer, do we have capacity for this as the DPW weighed in on this, because we're mandating the tie?
I think it's premature to be even having this conversation with DPW. The manager and I have had this conversation before. I mean, we are about to bring 2 new wells online. We hope that that's going to give us sufficient capacity for the next 5 years. I mean, we should have been looking at some of these issues 10 years ago. We're looking at, additional wastewater capacity and options. I don't know that, that is, at this point, should be part of the conversation.
No, that's all right. I'll go through my questions, and then you don't have to answer each one of them, just things that I want to point out. And then we can discuss them in the next meeting, or try to address them. So Shane, on page 2, just last, the minimum lot size, I get that. Site B, table B, I guess I don't understand why the open space would be different for A, C, and D. The lot size goes down for each individual unit, so I don't know why that wouldn't stay the same. Just a comment, we can come back to that.
Sure.
Frontage, I guess in table B, that's the parcel development. I guess I don't understand why there's 180 and 60 for frontage when you need 40 for a roadway, and if there's somebody who's 240-foot entrances, is that sufficient? Why do they need 100? Why do they need 80? Why do they need 60? In table 3, we talk about individual lot size, but there's no, and we talk about separation from each building on each lot, but we don't talk about any frontage for each individual lot. So I think that is a column that needs to be added if we're gonna, and is 30 feet too much? I mean, if you have a 4,000 square foot lot, I guess, 20 feet between buildings is okay, but we should probably look at that table. And if we're gonna design lot standards, we should have a minimum frontage requirement for each lot.
Sure.
In terms of density, we had an adult retirement village calculation that somehow flopped out of our, got removed out of our open space development. We calculate what they could handle conventionally in terms of a subdivision and give them a bonus.
Mhm.
So I know you have the basics for the determination, and we talk about density bonus and stuff, but there's really no way to calculate density. So I think we should have a formula, and then you can reduce it to those lot sizes or everything else. Because if you want to put townhouses, what you're saying in this ordinance is that you don't need individual lots. So how do we determine the number of townhouses allowed on the site? We don't want to create really dense developments, especially in residential A, B, and C, where those are pretty rural districts. I can see.
No, but yeah, but I would say my comment to that is that you still want, what you don't want is you want to establish a variety of style. You want to have, the project's not going to be all.
And I agree with that, but we need a way. You talk about density, and we talk about density bonuses, but there's no way to calculate that.
Yeah, it's a way of promoting the townhouse style and duplex style while also not having them deter away from, because then you're just going to end up with a bunch of single family lots.
Right, and I'm not saying we have to do single families. I'm just saying we have to come up with a way to calculate density. That's all. Like
I agree.
So many units per acre, or
Yeah, I would say that's the biggest
But-
thing, because I would say the biggest issue that I'm kind of establishing is balance.
right.
Because
so let's look at underlying zoning, maybe what that allows per acre, and then have some multiple of that or some bonuses.
That's
Some-
actually,
some
that's
some incentive for them to do.
no, I think utilizing underlying zoning is actually a really good idea.
And then we talk about density bonuses, so, I guess, other questions I have, I get the amenity structures and all that, aging in place design. Density bonuses, again, we need to establish a density, 55 plus, I just looking today, I use myself as an example, right? I think what we're trying to do is these can provide huge amenities for an older population. They can provide significant tax revenue, limited impacts on resources. There's not going to be a lot of water and sewer consumption. There's not going to be a lot of road maintenance and things of that nature. One thing just reading today that, I'm going to be 48 and I have a 3-year-old, right? So, I mean, I do. And I know you can't do it. You can't
say no kids.
Right. I know you can't say. So what I'm saying is that some towns I saw today, which I don't know if is the answer or not, but we should explore, is that they, design that you put in here may help us with that. That may be one way to do it.
Mhm.
The manufactured facilities we have in town now, I read that quickly today. Both occupants shall be 55. I looked at other towns around here. I think even Framingham has age 62. So I think we should just, whether or not what we have is right or not, I think we should explore that and make sure that that's stringent enough to achieve what we're trying to achieve, but flexible enough where they're saleable and there's demand for them.
Yeah, and I would say the 55 plus for both parties, that's a tough one, because then you're getting 2 affidavits. But I do understand that, because you don't want it to be that you placate a 55 plus year old person and then you have a large family there.
Yeah, I mean, I could be 55 with
a newborn.
Yeah, right, and a much younger wife.
Sure, you could. This could be your spot. But in terms of just kind of utilizing it, yeah, I think one of the goals too, and you don't want to kind of progressively say it, is that the positive of one of these developments is that you're not getting as many school age children as you would for if you were doing having multiple bedrooms, the goal is to have some style that's, a master bedroom on the first floor and then utilization of another bedroom, whether it be on the second floor for guests or a younger party that would live there, but to also limit the amount of, bedroom space at these locations.
And personally, I, I know they're gonna have to be denser than a conventional development just to make them work and
Sure.
just to get the density for people to use the amenity space and everything else. But I also don't want it to look like, hey, you drive by, um, you drive by a street off a high street and you see a nice conventional neighborhood, and then all of a sudden you see this tightly packed development next to it. You're like, it stands out as a 55
Right,
plus.
and
You know what I mean?
that's
It should,
why
it should
that's what
blend with the neighborhood.
yeah, and that's why I think density is important in terms of looking at these style plans. But I think there's the language they've added, it allows for the discretion of this board to kind of see what impacts could occur from this development, as well as look at landscaping and not not change the rural style of certain areas, but kind of utilize it in a way where it meshes well with whatever existing area where it be. Residential D design would be, looking a little bit different than something that we would want as a residential A. And that really doesn't come from a specific to design. It's looking for specifics from a dimensional standpoint.
Right, all right. I mean, those are my main concerns: density, open space, the tables. I think all tables, one, A, B, tables 1, 2, and 3 all need, to be added to and reworked.
Sure.
But I think it's a great first attempt. I think we should, personally, I think we should work on it. Have
Mhm.
another workshop before it goes back to council, so we don't end up back and forth with advertising and everything else. It'd be nice to have a document that we're comfortable with.
Yeah, and especially just kind of looking at our time frame, we'd like to have this right back before the board in a more complete sense in like June. So I'm happy to work with the board on this, having
If it's an ordinance already, then it's up to
yeah,
you.
then we'd be seeing it for, essentially by the time that we would see it as an ordinance, this would probably be the third time this board would be seeing it.
All right, so we should review this again at another meeting before.
Absolutely.
Oh, I know you're pressed for time, Mr. Driscoll. Can we just maybe hear from some of the other board members?
Oh, no, I'm not pressed for time. And I'm gonna, of course, I'm open up to the other board members and if there's any public as well. So I'm not that, I'm good. I'm good till 8 o'clock, so I'm good. If it seemed like if I seemed like I was going, I was just trying to shut myself off, that's all, so.
Hey, no problem.
You're fine.
Yeah, so go ahead. If there's anybody else from the board that would like to speak, and hopefully everybody does, go ahead.
I want to mention something. So thank you for the presentation, Mr. O'Brien. I appreciate it. My question leans more towards abled housing or supportive abled housing. Have we thought of incorporating maybe a percentage of this plan to be for people with disabilities? And the reason why I ask is you mentioned that part of the plan will be like, wide doors and, no step front doors and there'll be diverse like front yards or entrances, right? So I
Mhm.
think that could also be used for people who want to home own but have disabilities. Have you guys thought of that?
Yeah,
Does
so
it seem to be restricted?
yeah, no, part of my goal is to establish design concepts through this, so it's looking at it from an ADA accessible standpoint. The difficulty I guess we have is that, it would be restricted to 55 plus in terms of design. But yeah, the concepts of zero step facilities, one of the things that I looked at when I was looking at Stone Meadow and High Pond is that you got to go upstairs to get to your property. Whereas my goal with this is that you would, you know, i- if you have a garage, then there's going to be a possibility of steps. It's just kind of an unfortunate aspect of it. But the goal is to establish design for zero steps. So that would be you come in to your property, you would be in the kitchen, bedroom or not bedroom, but kitchen, living room, whatever. And then you could go out to your patio or deck, and that would also be essentially a zero one step concept as well. So looking at the grab bars as well, the possibility of design for ADA accessible bathrooms, as well as the width of these entryways being 36 inches, which should be suitable for someone in a wheelchair.
I mean,
So
I think Ms. Rojas's comments are good. And you know, that might be something that we look at in terms of density bonus if somebody's going to include additional ADA type compliant units. So
Or
thank you
ju-
for bringing
yeah,
that up,
because
Astrid.
yeah, I also mentioned, I think I mentioned in the documents of the design, the concept of universal design, which is design for all peoples to utilize. So that's something I definitely want to kind of bring as an action as part of this ordinance.
Mr.
I mean,
Arnett?
you know,
Okay,
naturally,
that
that'll
was
be
all I had in mind.
that'll naturally be your ranch, basically your ranch style, you know, you can't really make a colonial and an ADA style unless you're gonna start putting elevators inside a house, which, you know, it is possible, but I don't know if they wanna get into that, so.
Yeah,
But I think you're heading down the right path.
thank you, Mr. Architect. Mr. Design himself. No, I
Mr.
appreciate.
Astrid, did you have anything else?
No, that was just what came to mind. I think it's a great plan. I'd love to see it, move forward with more detail. And just, I'd propose having that in mind. Maybe that could be the exception, is there are definitely there's definitely a younger population out there
Mhm.
that could be in a wheelchair and would want to either own a home or, rent if this ends up being a rental. So I just want to, share it
Sure,
with the team.
absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing we could do, just Shane, just keeping in mind is we have the open space residential development, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And if somebody wanted to do, so this is 55 plus,
Correct.
but somebody could still do a conventional cluster development.
Absolutely. Or a
Maybe-
subdivision. Yeah.
Maybe they would get a density bonus or get an additional unit if they did an 80, we could amend that to do an ADA unit. If
Oh,
they
of
did-
course. We can, for bonus, yeah, we could require in terms of, there's different things that we could utilize as a density bonus that's be, a little more progressive. If someone decides to, utilize their property to include more ADA accessible bedrooms or units.
Mr. McDonald, Mr. Haley?
Yep. Well, I would just say, excellent job, Shane. This is a great first draft proposal. I think this is absolutely something the town needs to get done on. I just have a couple questions.
Sure
Nothing
thing.
nothing too crazy, I assure you. When you were talking about the density bonuses, you mentioned, I'm paraphrasing here. I don't remember the exact sentence. Something about how improvements to the town could grant somebody a density bonus. Could you describe what those improvements might be and what you might want to see out of that to be granted?
So I guess, I don't like to, I like to stray away from developer impact fees, but you could also utilize it in a way. I would look more for a transportation, say it's something adjacent, like the one in Hadley, there's a walking trail adjacent to it. So that would be, monies that would go towards the utilization of like assistance with improvements of a walking trail. Could be like something as similar as like a pump station be installed on a site. So that would be an improvement to assist with any sewer or water impacts. Extension of water and sewer in different areas of town. So it could be, I think it's broad enough where the planning board could say, all right, you get, X amount of units as 2 bedrooms because you're utilizing, these infrastructure improvements, whether it be on an adjacent property or you're looking to say there's a property where this property itself has sidewalk to it, but the adjacent street doesn't have sidewalk. So they look to perform sidewalk improvements based on this. So it could be as broad as just improvements, but we could also tighten it up similar to what we had in the CBD district, where we can specify what would constitute these improvements, or what would these bonus unit, how many units you could do based on these improvements as determined by this board.
Hey, Shane, just, Michael, you bring up, so Do you mind if I interrupt for 1 second? 'Cause I
Oh,
was-
no, of course, Pat, go ahead.
So I found the old one. So we had what was called an ARV, an adult retirement village.
Okay.
And, I'm not saying this is what we want to do, and I'm not, I frankly, I don't think this is enough, but basically what it was a cluster development. And if you age restricted it to 55, you get a 25% density bonus, right?
Okay.
And then I'm also looking, did you look at when Miss Burke was here and
I took a little bit of this from the flex development, but
We
not
did.
anything.
we did that flex development as well?
Yep.
So I don't, if you have that, I'd like to see that, because I know.
It's
I know
in like,
that was-
yeah, it's in like it's in a Word document format. You can see how that language got itself into the open space, as well as I've incorporated a couple aspects of it too, but more so from kind of just there's some minor things in there, but I'm happy to forward that along to the board of what that flex development was. But I couldn't find anything about the adult retirement village that you're talking about, Pat. If you have any language regarding that.
Yeah, we can get it from the town clerk's office. What happened was is it fell out, right? But we kept it in as a definition. So it came out of the use table, it stayed in as a definition. Then when Bobrowski did the rewrite, it came out as a definition. So
Gotcha.
we can get that whole thing. I have a piece of it here. So I mean, I think that's why it's important to have a calculation, so many, if you take the parcel and say, hey, so many thousand square feet, you get a unit. And then you can take those townhouses, duplexes, or triplexes, and maybe end up with more open space than 35 or 40.
No, I completely agree with you in terms of it's tough sometimes when, like, when I was focusing very so much on the verbiage of it, that you kind of get you kind of have to take a certain parcel and then imagine, what if that was there, what would it look like, and what limitations we want to put on it, but also look at it from a developer standpoint of, well, if a developer is going to come in and do the style of property, as well as the people that are living there, how much are these amenity spaces going to cost? How much is a clubhouse additionally going to cost? And considering that as well, and what the impact would be of the surrounding areas as well.
And, maybe we could take the existing density of our existing open space and even double it. I mean,
I guess we would
almost
have to
50%.
we'd have to better define what our open space is, because our open space is, we want to view it as recreational or more amenity space, whereas open space could just be
That's a,
open
No,
space.
I'm saying our open space development, the way you
Oh.
calculate, the way you calculate density is you basically remove all the wetlands. You
Yep.
take the underlying upland area of that site, and you divide it by underlying zoning. Well, obviously with 55 plus, you need higher density than that. So we should maybe use that same formula, but come up with a different
Yeah,
divisor.
yeah. No, I agree. I hesitate because, like, I want to think of something that doesn't take away from the open space, because if you reduce that substantially, then why would someone want to do it?
No, it doesn't reduce, I think you're misunderstanding
Oh.
the calculation. So you're not
Gotcha.
taking the open space at all. You still gonna need your 35% minimum open space. But the way to get to, and I can talk to you this offline, the way to get to the calculation, we can either just say, hey, so many thousand square feet per upland, or underlying zoning times 2, or you know what I mean, or underlying zoning times 1.5, or something like that. So
Yep.
there's different, I'm just looking at different ordinances as you're talking, and there's something we can work on
No, I understand. Thank you.
for the next meeting, whatever.
Mr. Haley, anything?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Mr. McDonald, I cut you off. I'm sorry.
No worries. I just had a couple of things. So Mr. O'Brien, will you touched on it a bit. Will not buildable space not count for the open amenity space? Like if they have like a wetlands on the property or something, that's not gonna count as like an open amenity.
Yeah,
residents
what
can use?
Yeah, I hesitate with that because a lot of properties, you would look at a property that's, say, 60 or 70% wetland, and people utilize that as towards their open space or their non-usable space. So it's looking to more incorporate usable space and open space towards amenity usage, because someone could say, I'm gonna build, we're wetlands on this property, but we'll do walking trails adjacent to it. The focus is more kind of on, trailheads and
Well, we have,
actually,
just for Mr. McDonald, and for you, we have a definition of open space. And the definition of open space says that it should, the percentage of the open space shall equal the percentage of uplands to wetlands.
Mhm,
So if you have 35% wetlands on the property, only 35% of your open space can be wetlands. We have that definition already.
yes.
Oh, okay, okay, excellent. Okay, I wasn't aware of that.
That's in the definition section of zoning.
Okay, I just had,
We can make it tighter and say all upland if you want to, Mr. McDonald, is part of this, but we have that definition in the definitions right now.
Mhm.
well, I don't want to I think this whole concept is great. I don't want to overly restrict it. I just want to make sure, we're actually getting what we're looking for here, you know what I mean?
I agree.
The one thing I would actually rarely disagree with Pat on is I think the age range that you have in the initial document and the way you have it written is fine with the 55, just one 55 homeowner.
Mhm.
I would prefer to keep that. I understand Mr. Driscoll's concerns there, but I don't see a 55 plus community that requires a resident to be 55 plus being overwhelmed with school children anytime soon, even if there might wind up being a couple there. So I think going a little more lenient on that would probably help sell units and fill units, and I don't think it would cause too much issue to the residents there. I'm willing to budge on that for sure and talk about it, but
And I think the design standards are pretty much going to drive that demographic anyway. You know what I mean? The way Mr. O'Brien has it, so that's fine.
And then I had one question for Mr. Rulli. You were talking about it's not really time yet for the waste and water issues to become part of the conversation. When would you say that we would be able to approach that and start looking at that?
I mean, I think it's a longer conversation that, as I said, we're in the process of dropping, looking at 2 new wells at Wellfield 5 and 9 out on High Street. We're comfortable that one or both of them are going to give us sufficient water capacity for the next 5 years. Wastewater is something that we're working on as well, but I mean, I think we're not going to see 30, 55 and older projects coming through at one time. So,
Right.
I mean, I think that, certainly keeping it on the radar screen is definitely important. And it's something that I talk about every day. And I appreciate you bringing it up, Mr. McDonald, but I don't want us to have some kind of moratorium on any new development because we think we have challenges with water and wastewater. I mean, we're aggressively addressing that on many different levels that we're not necessarily advertising all the time, but we're vigilant about it.
Oh, I certainly agree with you on that. Is there anything we could incorporate into this that could help assuage that in the future?
Well, there is a contingency that I included that allows for the consideration of that. So, at the board's discretion, they can provide more stringent standards to the impacts generated from the project. So that includes the quality of the land and location of wetlands, as well as public and sewer capacity. My biggest concern was not having this on private wells and private septic. I think it makes more sense for these projects to utilize town infrastructure.
I agree
And
with
that,
you on that completely. Yeah.
so I just, it would be a nightmare if it was
Yeah.
septically based, which there are opportunities with the open space and conservation developments that can still utilize septic. So there may be properties that aren't on sewer that could be utilized for open space. It doesn't limit someone's capacity. So you
Well,
see,
Mr. O'Brien raised this earlier. I mean, there's a couple of things, and you raised this, Mr. McDonald, as well, and we've looked at this as part of Vision Reality, is developer contribution. So if in order to service any of these sites, there needs to be a pump station installed. That would be on the back of the developer, but there's also technology with wastewater now that, you know, we might be able to do package plants at some of these locations. I mean, water is a whole different issue, but I mean, I think all of those things are going to need to be evaluated when something comes before you. And I'm glad that you're bringing it up because we probably should have been bringing this up 10, 15 years ago too, talking about development, but there's options, but we're not going to not have these conversations.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, I will just reiterate again. I think it's an excellent first draft by Mr. O'Brien, and I'm in full support of the concept. So hopefully we'll get a good draft over to the council.
Appreciate it.
Great first draft. I was just trying to scroll through my phone to find out the verbiage and the age. Could you go over the age part one more time with me, Shane?
Sure. It would require, let me pull it up so we have it up too. Age restriction. So there would be specific language within this ordinance regarding age restriction that would require that these be filed with the Registry of Deeds, as well as review from staff. And that this age restriction is running with the land and shall be enforceable, so that that limits the dwelling units for at least one person with 55 plus. Marketing shall be, you know, a strategy for Bridgewater residents, as well as the event of a death of an occupant or foreclosure. If for some reason the death of the 55 plus person, that age restriction exemption is allowed for the transfer. I put it as for 3 years, just based on how the knowledge of how messy sometimes things get with trustees.
Right.
But that number could easily be 1, 2, or 3, based on whatever timing that this board would allow for.
Well, I mean, the other thing too is these are minimums, right? So the HOA or the individual developer can be more restrictive than this. These are minimums. So if they wanted to say age 6, if I built a project or you built a project or somebody else built a project, we could say, hey, we're age restricted to 62. The town has no say if it's more restrictive, correct?
Mhm. Yeah, I just say because some places have 62, or like I said, the example you used, Pat, they went from 55 to 62. But in this sense, I think you want to cover all your bases in terms of just including 55 plus. I think that having it above it gets it, you know, I
Right,
don't think it's.
but the developer in their HOA can do whatever they want,
Oh, absolutely.
as long as they don't go below these minimums.
Below
course.
yeah. And so my thought is this: 55 plus person occupying adult child's adult child, right? I don't know how that could potentially look on an ugly side of things. Just popped into my mind as I was thinking about anything that wasn't beneficial in my mind. Because first off, I think it's great. My father and his deceased wife lived in a place much like what you're describing down in Westport. It's excellent. He's moved to one of the ones that exist in Bridgewater now by himself. Has to step up several steps. He's older now. He's not he still likes to ride his bike and do all the things that what you're proposing would offer, which is what he left in Westport. He left there to move into a single family house for maybe his last hurrah in a house with his wife, and then now he's in one of the Wyman properties, and he's not exactly happy with it. He would like a little bit more offered. So what you're saying, it might be past his ability to utilize it ultimately, because he's 82 now, going to be 83 in a few months. But it is definitely something that he would have gravitated for from 55 on. Absolutely. And that'll be me in a few years with a 16-year-old in a few years. So talked about that. I know Patrick mentioned that. I think literally every topic that I've heard brought up with the board is definitely worth exploring more and getting the details into that project and the plan moving forward. I look forward to creating something with this group that'll be reasonable and beneficial to folks that live there and us as well.
Shane, the intent of the open space, though. I mean, we have, and on every lot, we have an open space requirement, right?
Correct.
This is in addition to that. This is like, I have 10 acres and I'm in residential D. I'm putting 20% aside for walking trails, or it's not like grass around the houses, correct?
Yeah, I would say that the focus of this open space isn't necessarily, like you said, grass and trees. It's more to utilize it from a passive recreational standpoint.
So that,
Um,
so if I have 10 acres and I'm in residential D,
mhm.
my development envelope is 8 acres. And then I'm gonna have grass and trees amongst that, but 20% is being put aside as open space for walking trails and things of that nature,
I would
correct?
say that probably 7 acres of your project is probably development. 2 acres is for that open space, walking trails and amenities, and that other acre is probably the impervious surface that you got.
Right, I think we just need to make that clear that it's an open space development. This is an addition to
Correct.
the requirements of that district. So if you have a 10 acre parcel, right away, you're putting 2 acres. in
Yeah,
Residential,
it's
you're putting 2 acres to the side.
the offset you're getting is you're getting the ability to do duplexes and triplexes in a 55 plus. However, you need that those amenity buildings as well that need to be considered.
Now, I'm not super familiar with the, open space legislation and that kind of stuff. Would we get any benefit from differentiating open space between open usable space legislatively?
Well, we have the language already in our open space development. We could look at that, I guess, Michael, right, Shane?
Mhm. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking, because if we want, like trails, bike lane, maybe not bike lanes, but people usable space, instead of just, trees and grass, perhaps a language change there to solidify that might be an improvement.
Agreed. Okay.
And I think we just have to call out that the open space is just that, it's open space. It's not, hey, I put a road in and I developed X amount and there's 35% grass. It should be,
Right.
separate, separate and distinct from the area around the buildings and the road.
Agreed.
Yeah, perfectly said.
And it should be non-developable. It should be for passive recreation.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. All right. MJ, you got anything?
Yeah, I do, Shane. Having had a chance to read the presentation and what's being proposed, I like a lot of the points that go into this and what it seeks to achieve. And I know that we're in a very early stage of development on it. I guess the one thing I'm looking for myself personally, just from a community development standpoint, would any of this at some point involve us asking for maybe more sustainable materials or infrastructure on these residences, i.e. Solar panels, or for those that may own electric vehicles when they move into these developments, will there be EV chargers? Will there be systems in place that allow more opportunity to be more green and sustainable?
Sure. So we are a stretch code community. So based on the timing of this, these properties going to have to adhere to the updated stretch code that's going to be adhered to by the town of July 1. If you need any information about that, please contact Steve Solari. He's happy to sit down with you and talk about it. No, that's a joke. Yeah, so there are already more stringent requirements that are going to be required for new developments, just per our stretch code requirements. In terms of, there is some language in it where I talk about sustainable infrastructure as part of it too. But I do think that the consideration of solar panels would be a good quality concept as part of this. Whether we utilize it similarly like we do with other zoning ordinances where we incorporate it as a bonus for bonus units, whether someone gets an extra unit or two out of it, definitely could be something to be considered. In terms of mandating it, it gets into kind of a, I don't know, kind of a messy territory, because in terms of leasing for solar panels, they could have solar panels on all the properties, but some people have leases that come with it. So I guess it becomes more of a question of how a condo association handles
Well, it
solar
could be
solar
something
panels.
that the developer decides to do
Sure.
as part of the construction, but I think to your point, MJ, I mean, there's a real possibility that many of the people that live in these communities might be at a higher demographic that would have EVs. So having at least some EV charging stations incorporated within these projects, I think makes a lot of sense.
I think Mr. Solari will tell you that the new code, if I read it correctly, you're gonna have to have an EV charging station in every garage anyway. Is that correct, Mr. Solari?
Just as you said
I-
that,
Yeah,
fire chief was
yes.
grabbing his heart.
Yeah. That's in the code right now.
It's in the code, yeah.
It's in
So,
the code right, in the energy code right now. Any garage in the stretch code that we're in requires any garage EV. Even if you don't have a garage, you have to have it posted or on the side of the building. So it's getting a little bit more stringent, but it is already in there.
Kind of on the flip side of what Mr. Rulli was saying, I mean, not every resident, especially I would imagine older ones, they can't do the maintenance themselves, will probably not want not everybody wants solar panels on their home. There's a maintenance issue and a maintenance cost there, so I think leaving the developer some flexibility there is probably the wiser choice.
yeah, and it gets tricky on condos too, so. Any
Yeah,
other,
I'm in favor of them generally speaking, but it's not I don't think there's something you can just toss on every project and be like, oh, we're doing our best for the planet. I think it's a little more complicated. than that
Especially
sometimes.
it gets messy for ownership standpoint, yeah. But
more board comments? So, I mean, Mr. O'Brien, I planned on if there were members of the public here and they want to add some input, it might be a good idea to get some of that now. I was gonna open it up to see if anybody from the public had anything to
Oh.
say.
by all means, be part of the public process.
Is there anybody from the public? I know this is new, it's not an ordinance yet, was gonna work on it some more before it becomes an ordinance, but is there anybody that'd like to add any information at this point?
All right, we have Janet's iPad.
Hi, Janet Hanson, Pleasant Street. Just a couple questions for clarification. This wouldn't be in the PPD district, right? It's just, you're sticking just with residential areas, right?
Yeah, this proposal is primarily for residentials A through D, because I know
Okay.
there's been concerns in the past for the planned development district.
Okay, and I always thought of 55 plus communities. I was already under the impression that only 55-year-olds can live there. I didn't know kids could be in those communities. But listening to you, it sounds like they can.
That is correct. It really comes down to how a town's zoning ordinance establishes it. But if you go to many 55 plus communities that have such language in it, you're not going to see a lot of children. It's just not designed to be for people with a lot of school age children.
But they can have somebody younger.
Correct. And that's typical of a lot of 55 plus communities.
Okay. All right. I'm not sure where these would be in town, so I haven't heard like where the possibilities these would be, but those are the first two questions that I had, because this is the first time myself hearing about this, so probably have more questions later. Thank you.
Yeah, and just on that point too, it would be based on acreage. So there'd be specific sites that would need to incorporate a certain size and acreage for them to be located, as well as a bunch of other contingencies that we're trying to tighten up with this zoning.
Yeah, and I always sometimes have a problem with increasing density. You give us this, we give you that. I'm hopefully that would be a limit as to how much density or, increased units you would give a developer.
Sure, I guess it just depends on the parcel, because I know there's some properties in town that people would probably utilize different developments at that site.
Okay, I just wouldn't want it to end up being overcrowded if you keep saying, okay, give me this, we'll give you that. So, okay, well, thank you.
Thank you. All right,
Let
we
me
have
put sorry, Shane, I'm just gonna interject real quick. I just have a question off her comment. You said it's primarily A through D focused. Does that mean there's possibility for other areas or?
My
percent-
goal is to keep it as similar to the open space and conservation. So my goal with this ordinance is that we keep it within residential's A through D.
And when you say it's your goal, do you think you're gonna have an issue achieving that goal, or do you think that's what it's gonna be?
I would say there's probably one proponent that would push for another district, but I'm not considering that. And I wouldn't say that we would be considering that at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else from the public that wishes to speak?
We have a James Walsh.
Hey, yeah, thank you. James Walsh, Crescent Street. First off, I want to say, like, echoing a few others, I think this is really fantastic, like to see something focusing on 55 plus, focusing on ownership, incentivizing that. I think that's really great. I loved how you had some elements in here for conservation too. I did have a couple questions around there. One was, I noticed there was the 20-foot buffer, like wooded buffer, if that exists around the property. Is that something that counts toward the open space percentage, or is that separate?
That would be included as part of it.
Okay, cool. Well, I think that going back to what Mr. Driscoll said, I think the percentage seems like maybe a little bit higher and maybe consistent along the board kind of made more sense to me. Another question there, does this have any sort of, I know in some of our other zoning areas, there's mention of like night sky and kind of screening and light pollution and all that. Is that included here as well, or?
It's not included per se in this draft, but it would be something that we typically have as special permit standards in town. So this would fall under anything that would incorporate preliminary subdivision design. So there's an incorporation of subdivision rules and regulations, as well as what our requirements are for special permits and procedures for special permits.
So nothing to interrupt Mr. Walsh, but Shane, that's a good point that Mr. Walsh brings up about the night sky stuff. So if it is a special permit, in addition to these requirements, it would default to our standards for larger projects because it is a special permit, correct?
It would not be based on that, but it would be based on our current standards for special permits, which includes social, economic, and community needs, traffic flow, adequacy of utilities, neighborhood character, as well as impacts on the natural environment and potential impact on town services.
But if you look at, and I don't have it in front of me, but if you look at the sites, if you look at the standards for larger projects, doesn't it say special permit granting authority and site plan? Doesn't it say SPGA and site plan review?
Yeah, I would say that consideration of lighting should be considered as part of any review. So I would say that those performance standards are something that the board holds themselves. You guys hold those standards for most of the projects that you look. So I wouldn't say that this is anything different.
So I think we should make sure that none of them, if we do have to apply those standards that are in zoning to this project as well, I think we should just cross-reference and make sure to Mr. Walsh's point that none of them contradict each other,
Sure,
you know?
I agree.
Thank you. And my last just comment here too is about the height, the maximum height of the buildings. I noticed it was 35 feet, which just kind of feels a little high to me, especially if we're focusing on, aging in place, keeping things generally on one level. And I thought maybe reducing that, there's keeping with the character of the neighborhood, but also I know there were some comments around here about, what if folks are coming in with maybe, children or whatnot. I think maybe reducing the height would, by extension, reduce some of the number of bedrooms and maybe make that less of an issue as well. Just a thought there.
Sure. I just kept it as 35 feet, or was it 40 feet? I just kept it as because that's what our typical height for everything in Bridgewater is. That's the lowest standard of height in town. So I just kept it at that height. So that's what anyone can build up to, but it doesn't require anyone to build it as a maximum.
Gotcha. Okay. Makes sense. Thanks for your thoughts.
Thank you. All right, we have Pat Neary. Pat, you're on.
Shane, maybe go to Melissa and then Pat can come back if she's.
Sure thing. Melissa Remendetta.
Hi, good evening. Thanks for the presentation. I just had a couple of comments. One of the things you've mentioned is that you wanted to, and did I say Melissa Raymondetta, Lakeside Drive? Sorry if I didn't.
It's okay.
One of the things you had mentioned was modeling this after the open space conservation development zoning. And I did want to refer to 8.35, the maximum number of dwelling units, because it does say that last sentence there. It says excluded from the computation are the buffers. And I just did want to mention the 25-foot no touch zone by the Concom. So actually, with regard to the buffers, that 25 feet should be should not be excluded from that calculation. And if you're to write up this new zoning, I just wanted to mention that. The other thing,
And just not, Mr. Ramadana, just
Yep.
that you're referencing our existing open space, correct?
I am, yes. Yeah, it's 8.35 maximum number of dwelling units, and it has that excluded from computation
Yep,
are the buffers,
I got it
yeah.
in front of me.
And
Okay.
just to explain, so when initially, when I was here, new on the board when the state came in to do that. And the reason we did that was, and I believe, and God, that's over 10 years ago, but I remember that came up. The reason we do that is right now, if you have a lot in town, so if you have a 1 acre lot, only 50% of it has to be uplands. Or a 10,000 square foot minimum if you're in residential D.
Mhm.
So technically, if you built a subdivision now and you put a road in, half your lots could be wetlands. So in talking about that, we counted that buffer area as part of the calculation. One, because it gave the developer a little bit of high density, and two, it's essentially in the calculation anyway if you do a conventional subdivision, because the way our zoning is written is 50% of the lot has to be uplands, 50% can be wetlands.
Okay. It,
And
maybe,
that's in its own section in zoning if you look at that. And then in the open space development, I believe there can be no wetlands on the lot. So that's kind of like how that calculation came about.
okay. All right, thanks for explaining that. The other thing I wanted to mention is just in terms of when you're writing up the purpose, and I don't have the language in front of me, but to emphasize preservation of common land for open space and recreation, to emphasize the best use of the land in harmony with its natural features, and to retain the rural character of the town. And the other thing I wanted to ask about, and I know it's already been asked about once, Janet made this comment, but there is some residential usage permitted in the PDD, and that if this were to be excluded, if this type of development would be excluded, then perhaps that should be written in as well, because there is some residential use permitted.
Well, it would be similar to our table of uses for open space and conservation developments, where it would be a Y for R, A, B, and C and D, and then N's for everything else.
Okay, all right, thanks, Shane.
It'd be
Actually, it'd be a PB. You're right, Pat. It'd be PBs for those 4 districts or those 3
Okay.
districts.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
But
All right.
to Mrs. Ramadana's point, though, if you read the PDD, it says that you can also follow residential A. So if that's, should just, I agree with it. If we don't want it there, it should be clear. If we don't mind it going there, we can leave it the way it is.
Well, it's similar to an open space and conservation development could go in a PDD based on that, but it's also not a use within there. So I understand. Pat, you got your hand up?
Yes, I'm sorry. I thought you would unmute me, but I guess I had to do it. Thank you. Pat Neary, Lakeside Drive. And I think you and Melissa have cleared up my question about this use in the PDD. We have to specify that that is not the case. Also, I was concerned about the water allowance where wells 1 and 5 are coming online. So it all overlaps into the PDD. I know Mr. Rulli said that there's no chance that further development can happen over here. But since we're bringing on these new wells, that may change. So I'd like to get your thoughts on that, please.
Well, I don't want to talk about other projects. I kind of want to primarily focus on this ordinance because, you know,
Well, it affects this ordinance. It does.
in
I
terms of
can, Mr. O'Brien, Ms. Neary, the agreement that Claremont has with the town, it is limited to their particular, that site. So anything we're talking about tonight does not have anything to do with Claremont. Claremont is limited to 100,000 gallons of water a day and 100,000 gallons of wastewater. So that hasn't changed. Well, if we increase capacity somewhere else in town,
Right.
good for the rest of the town, not necessarily good for.
Pardon? That last sentence kind of
That,
faded.
I mean, if we increase capacity for other development in town, that's great. That capacity does not translate to
Right.
Claremont.
Okay. That makes sense. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody else, Shane? I can't, like,
I don't see any other virtual hands raised now or people with their hands raised.
all right, so again, this is a draft. We're gonna work on it some more. Are there any other board comments?
I just have, if this is off track, you can completely ignore it. It just.
Sure.
Mr. Rulli, is there any way they could ever increase that water capacity on the Claremont property?
It's doubtful. I mean, you know, given the amount of public interest, that is a legal document. I mean, I know that, you know, people have concerns, but I mean, that would be an action of the town council if they wanted to amend that agreement from previous years. But unilaterally, Claremont cannot increase that. That would be an action of the council.
Okay, sorry. I know that was a little off track. Thank you for answering that.
No, I think it's in light of some of the conversation, I think it's an appropriate question to ask.
10-4. Thank you very much.
Not trying to cut the conversation off, but if you think of something, you can interrupt me, but. So, Mr. O'Brien, do you want you got some feedback tonight?
I'm happy. Yeah, I'm happy with any feedback anyone wants to send me. You know, it's something.
Anybody wants to write your comments, or what do you want to have, a 2-week comment period, and then you can send it back to us draft?
I would say, you know, any period of time, 21 days is appropriate. Like I said, I want to turn this around relatively to bring this in front of council for at least have this back before this board as an official ordinance sometime in June. But yeah, I think
if you're gonna do that though, and you're gonna ask that, we would have to put this on our May 17th meeting.
May 15th.
May 15th, correct.
Yeah, we can have it as a communication. I'm going to say that the May 15th meeting is going to be a little bit busy, but I'm happy to have that as part of the conversation. But I'm happy.
But maybe just to keep it on track, we can put it on.
Yeah, absolutely.
And based on the comments and things that you get and discussion different board members have with you and staff, I mean, we can try to make some amendments to it, and you can get it to us for the next meeting before it goes to a council to sponsor.
Absolutely.
Is that how you want to do it? Or?
Yeah, I think that's totally appropriate. I'm happy to keep.
Because otherwise, if we don't do that, we're going to June.
No,
Okay.
I like your approach, Mr. Driscoll.
Right. And you don't know, things can fall off. I mean, a developer might come next on the 15th and ask for an extension. You know what I mean? So, why don't we just keep it on track if the board's okay with that?
I'm a little divided on that. I was initially thinking the June 5th meeting, and then we could still finalize it on the 19th.
Well, so I think what we're trying to do, Michael, is get a draft to the council, and then it's gonna come. So this is a workshop, right? And if we're unhappy with it at the next meeting, we can always continue it again before it goes to the council, or the council can sponsor it. But it's gonna come back to us as an ordinance. We're trying to give input before it becomes an ordinance. Why don't we continue it to the 15th? If we feel we're not ready or we don't like it, we can give that feedback, and then it's up to staff and the council to decide what they want to do. And if we want to continue it again, we can do that, but just to keep it on the agenda. We can put it on the 15th, and if you want to make a motion at that point to do something different, we can do that.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. That's okay. Yep.
Because I think this is not the ordinance. This is just we're
Right.
seeing.
This is staff
We're just-
providing,
We're just talking, yeah.
we're
I mean,
workshopping.
if you remember when Council Wood was there, this is how he liked to do it. We'd have a couple workshops before he sponsored it or he
Yeah.
asked somebody else to sponsor it. And I think it gets the major issues out of the way. And I think we gave Shane some of the things about like open space, density calculations, making sure. So I think all those things with age, whether we keep it the way it is or change it, I think all those things are, the tables, I think all those things, we gave Shane some feedback. He can look at it, give us an update at the next meeting. If we're comfortable with it, we can tell him we're comfortable with it. If we need additional changes, we can tell him we need additional changes, right?
Yes.
You've sold me.
I just, things fall off if we push them out too far, you know what I mean? That's.
Yeah.
Keep it on the agenda and then we can, if we.
Yeah,
need to-
especially when we're looking right now, we have one meeting in June and one meeting in July.
Yeah.
We're on
Oh,
a,
I forgot we only have one in June.
yeah, we're on a
One more
summer schedule.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, absolutely then.
Okay, so any other public or board comment? So between now and the 15th, Shane, get comments and ideas and stuff too from the board, and then you already have a bunch of input from us now that you can.
Yeah.
work with. Any additional stuff we can send you, right?
Yeah, and just iron it up and just me look over the document again, and after hearing everyone's thoughts and opinions, relook at it and kind of take those ideas in mind.
And I'll send you some of the stuff I referenced tonight, the old ordinance, the stuff like that, so.
Sounds good. But that's
mean,
all I have.
I think we obviously need a density higher than what's underlying, but I also think it should be some multiple of that underlying zoning, you know what I mean?
I agree.
All right, anybody else before we continue it, or ask for a motion to continue it?
Well, I just have one question. Would this interact in any way with any of the new form-based code districts? Is there going to be any overlap there?
No.
I don't think so.
No.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
Does somebody want to make a motion to continue this to the May 15th meeting if we have no further discussion?
So moved.
By Mr. McDonald, do we have a second?
Second.
Was that Mr. Haley? Mr. Haley?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Ms. Ross,
Yes.
Mr. Haley,
Yes.
Mr. Geller,
Yes.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
I'm a yes, okay. So, item 3, and I apologize if you did send them, Shane.
I didn't, so you don't have to apologize.
Okay, so we're gonna table the March 20th meeting minutes. So Mr. O'Brien, next item we have is the May 15th meeting. We know we have this continued discussion.
Yes.
And we have, what else?
We have everything continued from the meeting early April. I'm probably expecting a couple continuances on those.
What are
We
those, what are those projects? Just one of them is the,
A15 Bedford Street, 456 Bedford Street, and the other one is the corner of Plymouth and Mill Street. In addition to that, we have a preliminary subdivision that I'll be sending the plans over for. Additionally, we have a special,
where is that for?
that one, I forget which one it is, but it's a 3-lot subdivision. Preliminary plan. I'll have to relook at which one that is. But I'll send the information to everyone tomorrow, so they're pretty much all set from a review standpoint. I just don't have the name at the tip of my tongue, as well as through the recodification, special permits for duplexes now go through the planning board instead of the zoning board. So we'll have a project that's a duplex before this planning board.
When is that, Shane? June or May?
The May 15th meeting.
Where is that?
That one is off Broad Street.
Can you explain that process to me, Shane? I'm not familiar with it.
So we're being that the planning board is a special permit granting authority, we're going to look at a proposal for a property. So if they proposed a single family by right, it would be allowed use and just have to go for a building permit. But being that it's a duplex and duplexes are a special permit in the residential C zone,
And
C and D, it requires planning board approval for it. So they're gonna have to present why they're doing a duplex instead of a single family.
yeah, Broad Street's D.
And
Alright.
how would we review that? Is that like a site plan review or there's?
We would review it based on our special permit standards. So it wouldn't be under site plan review standards. It would be the standards of a special permit. So I'll have a staff report spelling out what our special permit standards are, but we're reviewing it based on that.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Planners report, you or Mr. Rowley, Shane?
I don't really have anything other than I appreciate everyone's feedback on the presentation. I just want to reiterate, we have the meeting on the 15th, but then we only have one meeting in June and one meeting in July. It'll be the first meeting, the first Wednesday in June, second Wednesday in July. So, just want to reiterate that. So, but that doesn't, mean that I'll try not to schedule any special meetings, but if there's some timeliness things that come up, I'll keep you guys in the loop on that.
Do we have anything coming down the pipe that might require one, or are you just talking?
We have a couple of the preliminary subdivisions that may be coming before us for subdivisions, as well as potential site plan reviews. But my expectation is that we can move forth with this schedule right now without any major issues.
Okay, sounds good.
Mr. Rowley, do we have any feedback? I know, since our last meeting, the town council adopted the form-based code and the MBTA overlay. Have we had any feedback from the Attorney General on the final document and the Executive Office of Livable Communities, or not yet?
I think he dropped off, Pat.
Oh, I can provide some input on that. So, in terms of EOLHC, I think everything's okay with the Attorney General. But we did get an update from EOLHC. So we're one of the 44 communities that have approved compliance with MBTA communities. And currently there's four municipalities that don't have it approved. So I can give you a status update regarding that.
So we are approved, is that correct?
That is correct. From a standpoint of EOLHC, we are approved, so we can.
And the Attorney General, correct?
Correct. They wouldn't have us on that list in terms of.
So based on all of our changes downtown, we don't have to make any amendments. It's approved as is.
Not that I'm aware of yet. They do have a compliance officers that may look at it 20 times and try to find something wrong with it, but at this time we're good.
Okay. Anything else from the board before we take a motion to adjourn?
So I got one question for you. Since the 15th is really could be a busy, pretty hectic night, do we want to consider meeting a half an hour sooner just to discuss what we discussed tonight?
That's a good idea.
If we're looking to really get this on the agenda or to council in June, where there's only one meeting?
The only issue that I could think of is that all these were noticed for 6:30.
Yeah,
So-
but
I'm only talking about discussing what we discussed tonight.
the workshop.
The
Oh, yeah.
workshop.
Oh, absolutely. I think that should be appropriate. Yeah.
How does the board feel about that? Great suggestion.
I'd be okay with it.
That's fine.
All right, so on the 15th, we're gonna do a 6 PM start time. The first half hour will be this document, Mr. O'Brien.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
When I
mean, if we don't-
inevitably forget about the time change, just text me.
It'll be on the agenda. Just remind
Okay.
me if I placed it on the
Good.
agenda incorrectly too.
And if we don't use the whole half hour, then so be it.
Yeah, we can just recess until 6:30.
Yeah, I think we'll definitely use the whole half hour. I mean, so,
Sure thing.
all right. So,
So do we need to revise that motion? I'm just curious.
no, No, we're good.
Okay.
We don't have a motion right now, right?
No.
Well,
Oh, well, we did make a motion to,
continue it to the 15th at 6:30.
maybe we should amend it just for procedural.
I don't think we set a time. We just said the 15th, right?
I don't recall. to
We
be
can,
honest.
we.
It was just the date.
Just a date, right?
Okay.
I think we're fine at 6 o'clock. Unless, Mr. McDonald, do you feel better redoing it? Let's redo the motion. I'm fine with that too.
Yeah, let's redo the
Yeah,
motion.
it takes 10 seconds. Why not?
All right, so does somebody want to make a motion to change the time for the workshop on the proposed zoning ordinance for the adult active senior village community to May 15th at 6 p.m.?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
And second,
Ms.
Have
Rowe?
a comment on the motion as well.
Sure.
Can we also include that the meeting itself starts at 6 o'clock?
Oh, as so amended.
Sure.
So motion by Mr. McDonald, second by Ms. Rojas, is that correct?
yes.
Yes.
All right, I'll take the roll. Mr. Haley,
Yes.
Mr. Geller,
Yes.
Mr. McDonald,
Yes.
Ms. Rojas,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. Okay, so then do we have a motion to adjourn
So moved.
by Mr. Geller? Do a second,
Second.
Mr. McDonald? Any discussion? Ms. Rojas,
Yes.
Mr. Geller,
Yes.
Mr. McDonald,
Yes.
Mr. Haley,
Yes.
and I'm a yes.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Have a good
Night.
night.
See you later.
Take care.